Hi, my name is Jasmine and I am new to AuthorTube, so my very first video is going to be me answering the new AuthorTube tag newbie. The AuthorTube newbie questions. I actually found out about AuthorTube through watching Jenna Morassi. She's one of my favorite YouTubers, so I watch just about all of her videos. And in one of them, she mentioned the term AuthorTube, which I had not heard of before. And so from there, I just kind of branched out, and I figured as an indie author, it might be something I could probably get into. The genres that I write in are mainly science fiction and fantasy, although I do write some literary fiction from time to time. And sometimes I try to blend the two. I most often write in third-person limited, past tense. Although sometimes I switch to first person. There was one story where I wrote in like present tense, but for the most part that feels kind of awkward to me. It's a little awkward to read and to write. And I'm not sure what category, not YA, although some people might sort of put some of my books in YA. It's not really a category that I read, so I don't feel comfortable saying my book's YA. So maybe like new adult to adult, and young adults can read them if they like. Plotter. For the most part I plot, and sometimes I plot way too much. I think for the most part I've always been a plotter, but I do end up being a pantser randomly sometimes. Like this past National Novel Writing Month, I was 200% a pantser, and I ended up not finishing the book. Sometimes I'm a plantser. With the first novel that I published, I outlined everything. I filled up a notebook with all of the world building. So I was a big plotter in that way. And then after that, my story just kind of deviated, so maybe I was a plantser. But I would not have, gotten that far if I had not plotted everything in the beginning. So if I had to choose one, overwhelmingly I'm a plotter. Number 6 is a long one. Oops, I skipped number 5. So I am published and self-published. For the most part, I am self-published, and I identify as an indie author. I did have one story that was published by a publishing company that I wrote under a pen name, and I don't talk about it. It's in a genre that I don't write, and it was something I thought I could do, and maybe one of these days I'll make a video about it. But yeah, I'm an indie author, self-published. For the first book I used purely CreateSpace. For this next book that I want to do, I want to use both CreateSpace and Ingram Spark. In the past, I've put like ebooks on Smashwords and Barnes & Noble, but I really should take those down because I think I want to rework them, and I published them as ebooks before I knew much about publishing at all. I feel like those stories can be polished a bit more. I was very new and I didn't know what I was doing. But yeah, for the most part, CreateSpace and soon to be Ingram Spark. Well, obviously I'm going to talk about the things that I'm writing, and marketing things as I encounter them as well. I did publish one book, but with this second book, I am learning more and more about marketing and things like that. And as I learn them, I guess we'll make videos about those. Writing tips and things about writing. But I also kind of want to talk about maybe publishing creative writing programs in schools, because my undergrad is, I got my BA in English with a concentration in creative writing, and then I've been looking into MFA programs, so there's that. And I want to talk about, I guess the thing that I also want to talk about is what's become my brand, which is that Black girls belong in science fiction and fantasy. So as something that I have come to notice, I've always been like super into science fiction and fantasy, mostly fantasy, since I could remember. And as a kid, I always thought that, you know, elves were supposed to be pale, you know, with long straight hair, because that's just what they were. I didn't see anyone that really looked like me. Elves, fairies, princesses, all things that I love. They didn't really look like me, and it wasn't until recently that I decided I want to do something about this. I want to do my part to represent more of us, more Black girls in science fiction and fantasy with my writing and, you know, other writerly things. And I think it's important. Representation is important. I started a Facebook page called Black Girls Belong in Fantasy and Sci-Fi, and the thing that made me start it was I saw a model and she did a photo shoot as an elf, and she looked beautiful. She was gorgeous, and she was everything that, you know, you would think an elf was, except that she looked like me. And I was like, there's more of this out there. There has to be. And so I started that Facebook page, and it sort of became my brand as an author, I guess. So yeah. Not to be cliche, but I'm totally gonna be cliche. The whole, I've been writing ever since I can remember. That's true for me. I remember, like, some of my earliest memories are me taking pieces of paper and like writing stories and illustrating them. I would write them in crayon or pencil. I would use like either whatever paper I could find, line paper, printer paper, construction paper, and then I would bound them together. Sometimes with like, I would tie up rubber bands or string or even hair clips. So yeah, I started really young. As soon as I learned how to write, I was writing. And I remember the first time I actually typed a story, I was in 3rd grade. So I was maybe like 8. Yeah, I was 8 years old. And I remember I was like doing like little news reports. I was going around like interviewing my family members. I would draw like the front page of my little news and write the headline. So yeah, I've always been writing, and it's always been something I wanted to do. In 1st grade, when they asked us what we wanted to be when we were older, I said author, but I also said scientist and an artist. I wanted to be a scientist, an artist, and an author. One of those things came true, I guess. That said, I do not remember the first story I ever wrote. I can remember some early ones. I can remember the first story that I typed out. It was about like this girl named Janae, and she met this big, bad, scary guy, and he was mean to her. And she ran away crying. But then he realized the error of his ways. And she was like, okay, fine. I guess if you're gonna apologize. And they ended up like falling in love and moving in together. That's the first story I typed. This is a tough one. Early on, it was definitely Edgar Allan Poe. I wrote a lot of, well, what I thought was Gothic literature. I mean, I guess it was like it towed the line between Gothic and horror, and I wrote in a very archaic way. It didn't occur to me until I actually started taking creative writing classes, and my professors kind of brought it up, and some other students kind of brought it up in workshops, and they're like, this is good, but you sound a little bit too much like Edgar Allan Poe. Like, no one really writes like this anymore. More currently, when I went to graduate school, I got my MA in English literature. Yeah, so I earned my MA in 2015, so yeah, I'm kind of old. But yeah, I discovered Margaret Atwood, and then I went to the English department chair, who was one of my favorite professors, and she loved Margaret Atwood, and as busy as she was, I asked her, you know, if she would have time to do an independent study with me, studying Margaret Atwood, and she said yeah, because she loves Margaret Atwood, and so that's what we did, and I fell in love with her writing, and the book that made me fall in love with her writing was Oryx and Crake, and to this day it's one of my favorite books of all time, and it's one of the books that I meditate on sometimes. I think I've read it twice, and I think I'm due to read it again because it's so good and I love it so much. But yeah, Octavia, I thought I was gonna sneeze. Octavia Butler's Blood Child. Like the whole collection, but mainly the short fiction of the same, I keep thinking I'm gonna sneeze, of the same title, Blood Child. And she wrote science fiction, but we did study it in my novel writing class, and I thought, if we're gonna study something like this in my novel writing class, it must be like, you know, good enough for me to like try to imitate, I guess. I was in a weird headspace at that time. I was directly and indirectly being told that science fiction and fantasy and like genre literature in general are, you know, not good enough. So I thought, well, if I'm studying Octavia Butler in a class, then this must be good enough. And I enjoyed it a lot, and so that's also something I try to like evoke in my writing, like the things that she does in her stories, the things that Margaret Atwood did in some of her stories. So those are the main two. And another would be George Saunders. I actually got to meet him and ask him questions. That was so much fun. But yeah, I read his short story Sea Oak in one of my classes, and it was a literary story, but it was also a zombie story, and I didn't think like that, something like that could be possible, and I thought, that's something I want to do. So yeah, if I had to choose 3 authors and, you know, works that really inspired my writing, even today, it would be Oryx and Crake by Margaret Atwood, Blood Child by Octavia Butler, and Sea Oak by George Saunders. More on the super genre side, the side that's like not literary at all, I would have to say Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi, and The Kingkiller Chronicles by Patrick Rothfuss. Yeah. Both, I think. I generally like to write when I get home from work. I don't work full-time, which means I'm always poor, but I do have more time to like read and write. And right now, my current manuscript is with a professional editor, so my phone is giving me a little message there. It's with the professional editor, so right now I'm not really like writing much. I did start handwriting some little things, but for the most part I'm reading, and a lot of that I do after work or sometimes during work if I have time. And so the same goes for writing, and yeah, before work, I do have time before work, but unless I'm feeling like really like there's this scene I really have to write, I usually write after work. Sometimes during work if there's like a lull. Yeah, and then on the weekends, I don't work on the weekends. So on the weekends, I just write whenever. Sometimes it's in the early afternoon, sometimes it's in the evening. So it's a little of both. Generally, I write in the office, which is where I am now. My computer is right here. Although often enough, I do write at work. I handwrite, and sometimes, you know, I get all these ideas at work, so I handwrite them in a notebook. Sometimes I do write them on like Google Docs on my phone, but I don't like, you know, the image of me being on my phone at work. Like with typing, people think that I'm texting and stuff, so I handwrite and then come home and then I type it all out and then add to it. What was the rest of the question? No, yeah, I think I answered the question. For the most part, I type, but I've been handwriting a lot more. When I first started writing when I was much younger, I mostly hand wrote my stuff. But now I'm sort of starting to get back into that. It feels like the ideas flow better when I put pen to paper. So yeah, I think maybe like 60-40, 60% I write on the computer, 40% I do handwriting at my office or at work. God, okay. A part of, it's just weird thinking of myself being like a part of AuthorTube. I guess I think it might be an interesting way to connect with both writers and readers. It's a way to build my platform, a way to reach out. I mean, yeah, to other readers and writers, but also like I want to say most specifically to like other Black women writers who write science fiction and fantasy. I think knowing that like I'm out here and I know you guys are out there too, and I think that would be a wonderful connection to make. For the most part, I think it would be fun, and like I said, I really would like to connect with more writers. I miss being in school and just being around writers all the time. Doing workshops. I was a part of my university's Writers Guild. At first I was the treasurer, and then I was the vice president. And we did workshops all the time, and I had my group of writer friends, and now we're all scattered, and we don't really get to see each other, talk to each other very much. So I think this would be a wonderful like sort of platform for that. And I don't know, who knows what sort of surprises and things will be in store for me. Now that I am, oh my gosh, I'm a part of AuthorTube. So yeah, so until next video, I guess I'm gonna end this here. Bye.